for England and Wales and Scotland. Rain clipping the far north of Northern Ireland just for a time. But notice an improvement coming in from the west as the rain clears towards the east. Still lingering on towards the more southern areas, outbreaks of rain continue and they will pep up as we head through the latter part of the day. Elsewhere, though, some brighter skies. Aberdeenshire down towards Northumberland, Derry as well as Antrim seeing some brighter weather to end the day. Now through Thursday evening and overnight, that rain, particularly across more western parts of the country, pushes ever northwards. The air remains mild wherever you are and further rain returns to Wales as well as the West Country later. Spits and spots further east through the latter part of the night. We hang on to some drier weather across the far north of Scotland. That's where the lowest temperatures will be overnight. But it will be a mild start to the last day of 2021. Yes, some rain first thing and some stronger winds, but notice the rain will wane as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Still lingering on across northern counties of England, but certainly some brighter skies through the latter part of the day as temperatures struggle a little bit across the far north, 9 degrees Celsius here, but still mild further south. And a bright, breezy and mild start to 2022. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Darren McAfee. You're watching GB News Live. Coming up in the next hour, the UK sees a new record number of coronavirus cases as Boris Johnson continues to insist the booster programme is the way out of the pandemic. Is he right? We'll be looking at that and also the situation in Scotland. Plus, Mercy Muroki looks back at some of her highlights. All that and much more in the next hour. But first, here's the news.
Good evening, I'm Polly Middlehurst. The UK has reported a record 183,000 new daily COVID-19 cases. Doctors have also been advising the Prime Minister that around 90% of people being treated in intensive care have not received their booster vaccines. Boris Johnson's urging people, therefore, to get the jab so they can enjoy the New Year celebrations. 800,000 boosters were recorded across the UK during the 5-day Christmas period. Meanwhile, some pharmacies in the UK are reporting a huge problem with shortages of lateral flow tests, saying there were requests every 5 minutes over Christmas. The Association of Independent Multiple Pharmacies is warning of patchy supplies following a change in self-isolation rules from 10 to 7 days if someone tests negative. The UK Health Security Agency says almost 8 million test kits will be made available to pharmacies by New Year's Eve. And in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she won't introduce further coronavirus restrictions because hospital cases have remained broadly stable. The First Minister says she expects a steep increase, however, in cases over the coming weeks. Scots are also being urged not to travel to England for New Year's Eve, where clubs are still open.
And it's also why over Hogmanay and New Year's Day and for at least the first week of January, we are advising everyone to stay at home more than normal, to reduce contacts with people outside our own households and to limit the size of any indoor social gatherings that do take place so that they don't include people from any more than 3 households.
Nicola Sturgeon. Meanwhile, in France, 2 people are testing positive for COVID every single second. That's according to the country's health minister, Olivier Véran, who also said France had reported a record daily high of 208,000 new cases, up from 180,000 on Tuesday. While the World Health Organization's Director General says he's becoming increasingly concerned by the increase in global cases.
Delta and Omicron are twin threats that are driving up cases to record numbers. I'm highly concerned that Omicron, being more transmissible, circulating at the same time as Delta, is leading to a tsunami of cases.
In news away from COVID, jurors in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell in the United States have been told they need to work on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day if they haven't reached their verdict. Minutes after arriving to begin the deliberations today, the judge confirmed the trial would continue through the holiday period. Maxwell is on trial accused of luring young girls to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein, charges she denies. Russia and Belarus plan to hold joint military drills next year as tensions rise in the region. President Vladimir Putin has met with the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko in St. Petersburg. Ukraine says Russia may be preparing for an invasion, something Moscow has denied. The Russians are instead demanding that NATO promises not to admit Ukraine as a member, a country which borders both Russia and Belarus. That's your news update. I'm back in an hour with more. See you then.
Well, as we've just been hearing in the news, it was a record day for the number of positive COVID cases across the United Kingdom. So 183,000 infections. But despite tougher restrictions in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, still the Westminster government is resisting the temptation to return to further restrictions here in England. Boris Johnson still sees the booster jab as the best way to avoid further restrictions in England, with the Prime Minister saying that he cannot stress too much how important it is to get a booster jab against COVID-19 to be able to enjoy the new year, he says, sensibly and cautiously. He added that there were 2.4 million eligible double jab people who were yet to take up the offer of a booster. Here's his message about what he had to say to those still making up their minds.
The Omicron variant continues to cause real problems. You're seeing cases rising in hospitals, but it is obviously milder than the Delta variant, and we're able to proceed in the way that we are. But that's one reason, and one reason only, why we're able to do that. And that's because such a huge proportion of the British public have come forward to get vaccinated, and particularly to get boosted. And we've done about 32.5, maybe more, million booster jabs now. And that is allowing us to go ahead with New Year in the cautious way that we are. But I cannot stress too much how vital it is for everybody to get that booster jab. I think that we've looked at the balance of the risks together. We generally concert our strategies together. We see the data showing that yes, the cases are rising, and yes, hospitalizations are rising, but what is making a huge difference is the level of booster resistance, the level of vaccine-induced resistance in the population. And what we need to do now is really finish off that work. I think everybody should enjoy New Year, but in a cautious and sensible way. Take a test, ventilation, think about others, but above all, get a booster.
Meanwhile, in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has been updating Parliament in Holyrood on the latest COVID situation there. In spite of the fact that hospitalisations are not rising dramatically yet, current restrictions on hospitality and events are expected to remain in place until the 17th of January at the earliest. People have been urged to stay at home and not celebrate Hogmanay in the way they usually would. It comes as some 16,000 new COVID cases were reported in Scotland, with 80% of them of the new Omicron variant. Well, earlier, our Scotland reporter David Donaldson updated us on what the First Minister had to say.
So the cases are slightly concerning, almost 16,000 cases. That's good. Obviously, a lot of people will be worried and concerned about that. The message regarding New Year, I don't think will come as a shock either, urging Scottish people to stay in Scotland and not go over the border and go to places like Berwick-upon-Tweed or Newcastle or perhaps further down Manchester and maybe Carlisle. So she's reiterated that message. Will people listen to the message? Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think some people will travel.
For those people who say, actually, this is all about hospitalisations, that's the key metric in all this, they'll be looking at what she said there and wondering whether she ought to perhaps behave a bit more like Boris and a little like how she's behaved so far.
Yeah, a lot of people will think that, and of course a lot of people up here are looking enviously down at England and saying, why have we got restrictions in place when of course people down in England are allowed to enjoy their New Year and mix freely. A lot of people would be slightly frustrated and annoyed by that, and you can't blame them for thinking that way, but obviously there's restrictions in place in Wales and in Northern Ireland. Scotland have gone down this route. Obviously England have decided to do something else, but certainly people up here will feel a little bit aggrieved that their New Year plans have been put to one side because of restrictions. And not just that, you look at the hospitality industry, restaurants, bars, etc. This is a busy time for them. They make a lot of money out of this, and here they are having to obviously restrict things, and that's going to be extremely difficult. Obviously the Hogmanay parties across Scotland have been cancelled as well, so it's a really torrid time for the hospitality industry in the country.
David Donaldson there reporting from wintry but very nice Scotland. Let's move away from coronavirus, focus on a new report that claims that 16 and 17-year-olds in care are at risk of being drawn into crime due to a new social care system that is unfit for purpose. That's the findings of a damning report by the Commission on Young Lives, who are asking for a total reform of the current system to better protect those vulnerable teenagers who make up a quarter of children in care. Where our West Midlands reporter, Valvinda Sidhu, has been speaking to the former Children's Commissioner for England and the chair of this report, Anne Longfield.
We've got is, in all kind of essence, an epidemic of teenagers that are coming to harm. They're being exploited, they're being targeted by gangs and those that wish to involve them in violence. And because of that, and because we are protecting them at the earlier stages, more and more teenagers have been coming into care. We've seen one of the biggest increase in teenagers coming into care that we've ever had. And almost a quarter of all children in care are now 16 and 17-year-olds. These teenagers coming in, they've often been living very vulnerable lives. They've been involved in violence. They've been targeted and exploited. They need a new kind of care.
The system, some would argue, isn't really doing anything for those young children it's been built for. I mean, we've seen the recent murders of Arthur Labinger Hughes and Star Hobson, and it seems that the same statements keep being made over and over again, that lessons need to be learned. When are those lessons going to be learnt?
Well, there is a review of children's social care going on at the moment, something that I pushed for some time. So there's an opportunity here to make improvements, and I really want teenagers to be high on that list. But there are some chronic themes going through the social care system at the moment. The lack of ability to identify early, the lack of data sharing, the lack of information, the lack of coordination with other agencies. And they're also stretched the seams in terms of funding. The average cost of a place for a teenager at the moment is an eye-watering £4,000 a week, £200,000 plus a year, and there's many that will go up to £10,000 plus pounds a week. Now, that's a child who's fallen into crisis, have very complex needs, that has escalating needs. Think what we could do with that funding if used earlier to protect those children from harm, to stop them falling into crisis, and also many more too. One of the things that we're really keen to look at is how we can develop new foster care models that actually could be really much better served for young people. Youth workers, for instance, if we could attract youth workers, train them up to be foster carers, they understand young people, they'll be able to build that relationship. That would cost a fraction of what we're now seeing.
What is the solution then? I mean, you've already mentioned a better foster care model, but what else do you think needs to be done to protect vulnerable teenagers?
I'd like a new teenagers' social care system, if you like. I'd like it to really concentrate on understanding and recognising when teenagers were at harm early, and working with those families to wrap support around those families. We need a kind of ring of protection for those kids so the exploiters can't get to them. If they do have to go into care, then I want a really different approach, local foster care that can actually work with families.
There you go, Anne Longfield speaking to GB News a little earlier. Now, the Royal Mint has designed 2 new coins to commemorate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations next year. 2022 will, of course, mark Her Majesty's 70th year on the throne. The 2 coins are a 50p piece and a £5 crown, both featuring a portrait of the Queen designed by the artist Jodie Clark. Well, the Jubilee celebrations will be a welcome distraction for Her Majesty, following the loss, of course, of her husband, Prince Philip, earlier this year. That's according to the royal correspondent Angela Levin, who says that the Queen was unusually open with her emotions during this year's Christmas Day address.
I think it was very emotional, and it was very interesting that she did decide to open up. And I think, in a way, it's an attempt to answer the hurt she's experienced this year. She would normally have ignored that, but I think the pain has been enormous from Harry and Meghan. I think she's been shocked to the core, and it must have upset her tremendously when Prince Philip was dying in hospital, and she had this extra anxiety to concern her. But she's not going to give in, but she wants you to know that she hasn't brushed it aside. And I think with Prince Andrew too, who is a real favourite with her, that she feels this is all very draining. But, you know, she likes to be positive. She wants us all to be positive.
There we go, Angela Levin. OK, that is it for me for now. Coming up next, Mercy Morocco gives her take on the year's big news stories. Nana is here at 9 and back again tomorrow evening. But before all that, let's bring you up to date with the weather from the Met Office, and it's looking unseasonably warm for the new year.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Another mild day tomorrow. Still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the